Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to Olainfarm Investor Conference webinar about financial results and company's activities of the first quarter of year 2017. Today we are hosted by Olainfarm Management Board member Salvis Lapiņš. Before I give the floor to Salvis, short reminder about the agenda of the webinar. As always, we will start with the company's presentation, after which Salvis will answer all your questions. If you would like to use this unique opportunity to ask a question directly to Mr. Lapiņš, please use the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. All questions will be addressed after the presentation. However, you can send the questions in during the presentation. Salvi, I invite you to start the presentation.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me well? Is everything working?
Yes, we are hearing you well.
Okay, thank you, Eva. Yes, indeed, this is yet another webinar of ours. This time I will cover the usual things, which are our financial performance during first quarter of this year. And since this is the summertime, and since we have quite a few recent events, I won't have any special focus this time, but we'll keep some ideas coming before next webinar after the results of Q2. So let us start. And yes, the first quarter had quite nice sales. This was the second best quarter ever, as you can see in the charts, and with quite a margin, the best Q1 in our corporate history. As a group, we saw the products worth more than 28.6 million euros, which is a 9% increase compared to last year's first quarter. Pharmacies made sales of 5.2 million gross, or 2.4 million net. Sylvanos made sales of 1.6 million gross and 1.4 net, and total sales added only 1.9 million to the group sales, mainly because in the first month of the year, we still hadn't sort of normalized our sales to Russia by Sylvanos. But that has changed in February, March, April, and May. Profits are looking quite good. The unaudited version is 3.7 million euros. Which is a slight increase compared to last year. Sorry for not being corrected in the text. Different factors have been influencing the profits of the first quarter. It was adversely impacted by provisions, about 0.3 million of several doubtful assets that they have. And also for those of you that have followed a bit more closely, our report, you'll notice that our sales and administrative costs have increased, and this has happened pretty much due to conversion from rep offices to daughter companies in several markets that we work. Therefore, Q1 to Q1, you see quite a significant increase. But since that happened pretty much evenly throughout last year, if you do the same comparison between Q1 this year and Q4 last year, the increase is not that dramatic. Now, if you look at EBITDA margin, you see in 12 months EBITDA at 17.1 million, which is again the lowest since 2012, and the margin is at 15. EBITDA margin is at 15%. Which is lowest for more than 7 months since we've been preparing these charts. Now, although the profitability was good, two things that have happened. One is sales and administrative costs that have increased, and they of course are reducing EBITDA. So they are reducing EBITDA. And one thing that positively influenced our profitability in Q1 was foreign currency gains of about 1 million euros, and since foreign currency gains are not part of EBITDA, you don't see that sort of positive aspect of EBITDA. So therefore, EBITDA numbers are not that great in Q1. Again, as influenced as influence of sales and administrative costs will diminish over time, that EBITDA situation should also improve. If you're looking at sales by countries, Russia's share is down to 28%. Last quarter of last year, it was somewhere in the area of 40%. So Russia has been diluted pretty much by Latvia, which has slightly lower sales than slightly lower sales to Latvia than we did to Russia, but still we're talking about roughly 28%. Ukraine is very clearly underperforming. You see, it's only number 4 market of ours, and very closely followed by the Netherlands. And the sales drop is about 59% compared to the first quarter of last year. One thing that derives from there is, of course, the provisions. You may remember that last year we made about 4 million euros provisions for Ukrainian receivables, and since we are gradually covering the old outstanding Ukrainian debt, depending on how much they pay us, we're expecting that we might probably decide on some sort of re-provisioning either late this year or early in 2018. But because of the falling sales volumes to Ukraine, that seems very unlikely in any time soon. Shipments to Netherlands have increased by 271%. And that has made Netherlands 5th biggest market of the group. But as you will see in the next slide, which is here, pasta itself isn't doing that tremendously well. The reason being that last year we sold quite a significant amount of pasta also to Ukraine. So that's one of the factors how pasta overall hasn't changed much, but sales to Netherlands have increased dramatically. Now, if you look at top 10 products of ours, you will see that we have a leader change. Soluble ferrugino products, so Furamag and Furasol, have taken lead, and they have now 16% of share in sales in Olainfarm products. And Nerolin has only 14% share, which is quite low. Never had that low share since I remember making charts like this. And this might be a time for the first poll question, which is quite a traditional one. Every time after I have a short introduction about our figures, I'm asking people to say what they think. Do they think that results of that previous period are better than they expected? Do they think they're just what they expected, or do they think they're somewhat worse than they expected? Please take your time to vote, and we'll be back to our charts after you've done. Let's give you a few more seconds. In the meantime, we will be when we return to the presentation screen. We will be talking about how. Yes, here we have the next slide. Growth drivers probably is not really the best name for the slide, because if you look at products of Olainfarm, they do not really seem to be growing as nicely as we have expected, partially because of the fact that we had some extra sales to several countries in the last quarter of last year, not least Russia. Now you see that from all the 15 products that we are having a look at, 9 are growing. In monetary terms, the leading product from a Furasol combination has added the most, and that's about 500,000. Etizine, which is now number 4 product of ours, has added another 300,000, and 200,000 have been added in one of our chemical products, which is 1-chloride 3.5-dimethyl adamantane. I hope you're writing that down. Now, in relative terms, this 1-chloride 3.5-dimethyl adamantane has added 224%. The basis, of course, is small, but the relative terms growth is nice. Memantine, which is a slightly smaller product, has added 219%, and the leading product Formac has added 22%. Now those were the good news. Now the leading product, or formerly leading product Nuufen has lost 900,000 in terms of sales in this first quarter compared to the first quarter of last year. All other products combined have lost about 1 million in sales compared to first quarter of last year, and Adaptol has lost another 900,000 total sales. In relative terms, that doesn't look that bad, but again, for these products, the base was quite high. All others lost 45% in sales, Nuufen more than a third, and Adaptol almost a third. Now, if you look purely at Olainfarm products, then a deficit of 2.2 million, which is how much we fall behind last year's first quarter, is partially compensated by increase in sales of other products. You remember, since we have a pharmacies, we are supplying pharmacies with our own products, and that has compensated about 700,000 of those sort of missing 2.2 million. And so for those of you who remember our monthly sales numbers for first quarter, we are about 1.5 million behind last year's schedule in terms of sales. And now if we look at the countries, here we do take into consideration, of course, also the sales of products that are not produced by Olainfarm. So the picture is a bit nicer here. Here we have 11 of our top 15 countries growing, and of course in monetary terms, we're really glad that our three leading markets of Russia, Latvia, and Belarus all have gained. In monetary terms, Russia has added 1.4 million, Netherlands has added 1.3 million, Latvia has added 0.8 million. And in relative terms, Georgia has grown like crazy, almost 700%, but then again you see in the chart that the base is reasonably small. Bulgaria has added 300%, and Netherlands have added 271% compared to the first quarter of last year. But again, in all three cases, the basis is reasonably small. In monetary terms, of course, the biggest sales reductions happened in Ukraine, and this year we are selling by 2.9 million less to Ukraine during first quarter than we did last year. All other markets combined have lost about 0.7 million, and Turkmenistan about 200,000 euros. In monetary terms, in the relative terms, it's 59% in Ukraine, as I said before, 42% in Turkmenistan. So that's briefly about our first quarter numbers. And like I said, there's been a lot of activity going on since our last webinar. And of course, the most important one of those has been our annual general meeting that we had on June 1st. Besides all the sort of traditional decisions that AGM is making, like approving annual accounts and approving targets for next year, there are several other things that AGM decided. Dividends of more than 9 million euros were declared. Articles have been amended, and now the change that was made to articles provides that now we'll have internal auditing committee consisting of 3 members instead of 1 as it was all the time before. It also elected 2 additional auditing committee members. Because of Ms. Gilya Gildeyeva resigned shortly before the annual general meeting, it had to re-elect the Supervisory Council. And also the AGM approved the sales and profit targets for this year. Pretty much they confirmed them rather than approved, because we've been publicly announcing them earlier. So let me remind you that what is approved by the AGM is standalone sales of 96 million, standalone profit of 12.7 million, consolidated sales of 127 million euros, and consolidated profits of 15.5 million euros. So this is about the time I think I should ask next poll question. And that poll question is, what do you think of these targets? Are they realistic, pessimistic, or optimistic? In other words, Do you think we will reach them? Quite close to them? Do you think we might miss them in the sense that we'll be selling less and earning less? Or maybe you think they are very modest and we are capable of selling and earning much more than the target says. So take your time. And before we move to the next slide, and in the next slide I'll be talking about dividends. I hope those of you who have followed us already know that this year we proposed to the shareholders to pay out reasonably generous dividends. Well, thank you for those who voted. Yes, dividends. So this year in total, initially we wanted to pay dividends of 0.66 euros per share. The idea that we should divide the payments into 3 parts also was announced quite a while earlier. What has changed compared to what we proposed earlier is that formally the dividend payment would be 64 euro cents per share instead of 66 euro cents per share as initially announced, but 2 euro cents per share will be paid from reserves that we have accumulated as a result of denomination to euros from Latvian lats. Why is that important? That's purely for taxation reasons, because in most countries dividends are taxable one way or another, but of course the repayment of share capital is not taxable. So our shareholders will be having some tax savings on small fraction, but still will have some tax savings on that payment. Now these are the dates. The first part, 22 euro cents, was already paid on June the 20th. The next payment will take place on September the 12th, and that will also be 22 euro cents per share. Now 20 euro cents per share as dividends will be paid on December the 12th, and the last part of 2 euro cents per share will be paid as reserve disbursement on December the 20th of this year. Now, and this is about the time I should ask the last polling question for this afternoon, and this is probably more to those who are shareholders. Just out of curiosity, we've also seen the price hike of Olainfarm shares recently. Therefore, I'm curious how much of you have spent your dividends on buying more Olainfarm shares, or I mean, how do you treat them in general? Do you invest them in Olainfarm shares? Did you invest them elsewhere? Maybe you had a good midsummer because that payment took place very shortly before that, or maybe you have missed the opportunity to earn some nice dividend yields. So please take a while and mark your answer. We'll give you a few more seconds before we go in a little greater detail to what else our AGM was deciding upon, and then moving to some other things like the latest acquisitions of ours. Yeah, one of the things that I already slightly touched upon is that our AGM elected the Auditing Committee, and according to European regulations, we have to increase the number of members from 2 at least 3, which we did, and some other rules that regulate that they should be independent. They should have at least 1 council member among them. So now the Auditing Committee comprises of Mr. Vistos Gutlaus, who has been the only member of the committee for several years, Ms. Valentina Andreeva, who is the Deputy Chairperson of our Supervisory Council, and Ms. Gunta Westmanek, who was a member of our Supervisory Council. So this has been voted by the annual general meeting on June 1st. Another decision that AGM made, because like I said, Ms. Gildea resigned from membership of Supervisory Council shortly before it, so the AGM had to formally re-elect the council. So 4 council members remained the same, and but one new Supervisory Council member was elected. And his name is Andris Krūmiņš, and he has a degree in psychiatry. He is ex-parliamentary secretary in the Ministry of Health, and he is ex-CEO of a clinical trials company called SIA Multi-Trial. So there are some, of course, expertise that he could add to our team, and of course, add his knowledge in supervising the issues that he has quite decent experience in. What else has changed? But this is not the decision by the AGM. Ms. Jelena Bartsova, long-term board member of ours, has resigned also relatively recently, and Mr. Vladimir Krušinskis has been elected to be the new board member. He is replacing Ms. Bartsova. He has been technical director of ours since 2012, and his previous experience. Some of you may remember that a few years ago we had a company called Rigas Farmaceitiska Fabrika, another pharmaceutical company in Latvia that was listed in the secondary list, and he used to be a technical director in that company prior to joining our team 5 years ago. So we should good luck to Mr. Krušinskis for his future work in Olainfarm. Also, we have made some acquisitions since we last spoke to you. We have acquired this year SIA Parmentes Apteeka, who owns a pharmacy in town of Ventspils. Sales of that company in 2016 reached 830,000 euros. SIA Veselība owns 2 pharmacies in town of Bauska. We expect their sales this year to be slightly above 2 million euros. SIA Olainfarm Veselības enters the local clinic, formerly outpatient clinic, formerly known as local polyclinic, as they call it in this part of the world. Their sales last year reached €500,000. For many number of years, they've been working with little profit. However, we do expect this outpatient clinic to become to add clientele to SIA Daimed, the company that we acquired late last year. So we see certain synergies in strengthening Daimed as well. Also, we acquired SIA Roma, who was a distributor of cheaper mass market cosmetics. The main assets of that company include logistics systems and some rebatable corporate income tax. And both of those assets and some of the distribution contracts that they have are of good value for Latvia's Apteeka. So the transaction hasn't been finalized yet, but we're quite sure there will be no goodwill arising from transaction like that, meaning that all the assets are very favorably priced for us. And the very last acquisition that just took place, we acquired SIA Apteeka, a company that owns 2 pharmacies in the town of Madona, and their sales last year just slightly exceeded 1 million euros. So our pharmacy acquisition alone, even if they're not improved, might add something like 4 million euros to our consolidated sales, and of course boost the non-consolidated sales via our sales to our own pharmacies. So that's about it. That's about what has happened in first quarter of this year. Like I said, quite a few things have happened, and also this is summertime and seems to be one of the rare days we have more or less nice weather here in Riga. So for that reason too, I suggest that we move straight to Q&A session. So no specific focus this time, but when we face the typical autumn weathers that we have here, I promise we'll have again something exciting. Eva, that would be it from me. Do you have any questions?
Yes, Salvi, we have received some questions in advance, but those who would like to still submit their question, you can do that in the questions section in the settings panel zone. The question was sent in and it sounds like this. Olainfarm has acquired a recreational house in Thailand. What is the purpose of this acquisition? Are main shareholders or management members going to stay in this house? Salvi?
Well, to be precise, it's not Olainfarm that has acquired the house. It was done by a daughter company of ours, a travel agency, which is called First Class Lounge. Now, The challenge for first class lounge for quite some time has been to have more clients than just servicing Olainfarm and its daughter companies. And they, as they had the first successes in that, one of the things that they faced, that they have a sort of clientele that, especially in wintertime, wants to go to Southeast Asia, particularly to Thailand, and quite a few of them want to rent villa instead of stay in hotels. And in order to expand in that business a little bit, they have teamed up with some of the Thai partners, and have actually, what is acquired is unfinished villa in Thailand, which is being completed right now. So for the next tourism season of Thailand, which will normally start somewhere late September, early October, they will have this villa available for rent. Now, whether management of Olainfarm will be staying there, it really depends on whether they would be ready to pay the competitive price for the villa as it becomes available. So, but in no way is it some sort of specific favor. This is an attempt to diversify first class lounges business away of just servicing business trips of the group. As far as the asset itself is concerned, if the approach by first class lounge is that if this attempt fails, then the asset itself should be valuable enough and liquid enough. If this rental business doesn't work out, then there might be a good demand for coastline villas in Thailand. So obviously, even in that case, we don't expect any losses from that. Eva?
Thank you. Seems that all questions have been answered, and therefore I will remind that recording of the webinar will be available in the Nasdaq Baltic YouTube channel and in company's announcements. Salvi, thank you for spending time with us, and participants, thank you for joining.
Thanks for joining us despite relatively nice weather. I'm talking about Riga. Enjoy the summer, and see you next time in less than 3 months. Thanks for joining.